4 days to go for the G20 summit. The world's most powerful leaders are coming to New Delhi, and the focus will be on India. As G20 president, what are India's priorities? What is India's agenda for the summit? Can it unite an increasingly polarized world? It won't be easy, but India is not shying away from this challenge. In an exclusive interview to Network 18, Prime Minister Modi has spelled out his priorities. He spoke to our sister publication Moneycontrol, and he weighed in on a lot of issues, on India's priorities, on the issues that have caught his attention, and on how India will contribute to the G20. Tonight, we are bringing you the highlights of this exclusive. Let's start with the agenda. How does Prime Minister Modi define India's priorities? He's guided by an old but familiar motto, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas, which translates to everyone's support, everyone's development, everyone's faith and everyone's effort. This was his pitch for the 2019 election. This is what he promised the people of India when he ran for a second term in 2019. And the same idea has shaped India's G20 agenda. Let me quote from what Prime Minister Modi said. This is our guiding principle in global relations as well. When we laid out our agenda for the G20, it was welcomed universally, because everyone knew what we would bring, that we would bring our proactive and positive approach to help find solutions for global issues. How has the world responded to India's approach? Positively, according to the Prime Minister, and I'll quote again from the interview. When global leaders meet me, they're filled with a sense of optimism about India due to the efforts of 140 crore Indians across various sectors. They're also convinced that India has a lot to offer and must play a larger role in shaping the global future. These are Prime Minister Modi's words. What fuels this optimism? What captures the attention of world leaders when they see India? One of the standout stories is India's economic growth. India is the world's fastest growing major economy. It has beaten expectations, and how? Last week, we got some numbers. From April to June this year, the Indian economy grew at 7.8%. And these are fantastic numbers given the global environment. Most countries are reporting sluggish growth. India's pace has given more confidence to its policymakers. They can chase bigger goals on the world stage. And Prime Minister Modi highlighted this during the interview. Listen to what he said about the economy. India's growth is not only good for Indians, but also for the world. India's growth is clean and green growth. India's growth is being achieved with a human-centric approach that can be replicated in other countries too. India's growth helps further the interests of the global south. So India's growth trajectory serves as a model, a template for other developing nations to follow. The G20 helps India showcase its growth story. It also provides growth opportunities to other nations, especially in the global south. Again, this is a key priority for India, addressing the issues of the global south. Usually, this forum, the G20, like most international forums, is dominated by the concerns of wealthy nations. But India is taking a different approach. It is championing the cause of the global south. India has pushed for the induction of the African Union into the G20. India is also working closely with the G20 Troika. That's Indonesia, India, and Brazil. Indonesia hosted the summit last year, and Brazil will take over the presidency from India this year. So by working closely with these countries, India is trying to ensure continuity. Prime Minister Modi says, India is batting for the global south. And I'm quoting again, India has also been advancing the interests of the developing world, including the interests of nations not represented in the G20, such as the countries of the African Union. Further, perhaps for the first time in the history of G20, the Troika is with the developing world, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. This Troika can amplify the voice of the developing world at a crucial time when there are increased tensions due to global geopolitics. Expect all these issues to come up again when the G20 leaders meet over the weekend. With this interview, right before the meetings, Prime Minister Modi has set the tone for the G20 Leaders' Summit. But the guest list is still unsettled. Two big names have already dropped out: China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin. Could Joe Biden be next? The US president is supposed to arrive 2 days early. So this Thursday, he's supposed to arrive on Thursday, but his travel plan is facing a last-minute hiccup. The First Lady, Jill Biden, has tested positive for the Wuhan virus. What about the President? His latest test results came back negative, but the White House says he will be tested at regular intervals. He will be monitored for symptoms. Now, as things stand, Biden will come to India. His latest schedule was released after Jill Biden's diagnosis, so the assumption is that he will travel. But what if he tests positive later today or tomorrow? What if he starts showing symptoms? Then things could get tricky. Biden last contracted the Wuhan virus in July 2022. He isolated himself inside the White House. All his work was carried out on Zoom. Will there be a repeat this time? We looked at the latest guidelines from the US Center for Disease Control. If you test positive, you must isolate for 5 days. That is the minimum. If you're sick and awaiting results, same thing, isolation. And if you're negative, well, then you're free to carry on without isolation. So Joe Biden needs a negative test result to board that flight to India. His other option is riskier. The president can choose to ignore the CDC rules. We should have an answer in the next 2 days, either way. But talk about bad luck. Biden has invested a lot in this visit to India. He wants to reach New Delhi in advance. He wants to hold talks with Prime Minister Modi. Some key issues are on the agenda, like the possible sale of mini nuclear reactors, drone deals, new visa rules, the war in Ukraine. There's a lot to talk about. So it's supposed to be a very important trip for him. Also, Biden's first as the US president to India. It would be a shame if the Wuhan virus derails it. His absence would also be a setback to the G20 agenda. After all, this is a financial grouping. And the United States is the biggest economy of the world, also one of the biggest polluters in the world. So you need Joe Biden in New Delhi for key decisions on climate change, on debt relief, on supply chains, basically on most issues. But beyond policy, this is also about optics. It's about that moment when you take the family photo. Imagine a picture without Putin, Xi, and Biden. It's all that people will talk about, not the dozens of leaders who attended, but the big three who did not. Having said that, it is out of India's control. You cannot help it if Biden gets the Wuhan virus or if Xi Jinping puts petty politics over global good. All you can do is prepare. So let's check in on how New Delhi is getting ready for the big event. The final touches are being added. The entire city will soon turn into a fortress. The plan is to deploy 130,000 security personnel. This includes the Delhi Police, the Central Forces, and the National Security Guard. Snipers will also be posted atop buildings in central Delhi. It's like nothing that India has seen before. The last big diplomatic gathering was back in 1983. New Delhi hosted the 7th summit of NAM. That's the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM. Dozens of world leaders gathered in New Delhi that summer. But that was 1983. Today, the situation is much different. The technology is much more evolved. The security challenges are more dynamic. So the logistics will be a nightmare. And if you happen to live in Delhi, I have advice for you. Don't make weekend plans. Stay home. Road traffic and metro services will be regulated from Thursday night. Your delivery apps will also not work. So no Swiggy or Zomato. I know it sounds like a lot of trouble, but trust me, such summits are worth it because they bring international attention on the country, its people, its culture, and its progress. And India is trying to do the same. If you travel through Delhi, you can spot some new additions like murals and sculptures. All of them represent India's culture and achievements. Of course, they come at a cost. The government has not revealed the exact cost of hosting this summit, but most reports quote the same figure, around 1,000 crore rupees. That's $120 million. How much have other host nations spent on G20? Indonesia spent around $33 million for the Bali summit last year. New Delhi is spending 4 times that amount. But for India, this is not just a rotational presidency. It's about announcing its arrival on the world stage, about taking a place at the high table of diplomacy. So here's hoping that the summit outcomes can match the cost. Going to be renamed. There's a lot of buzz around this question. Many believe India could soon become Bharat. Why all of a sudden? Well, 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is this invitation. It is being sent out by President Draupadi Murmu. The invite is for the G20 dinner. Look at what it says below the national emblem. President of Bharat. It usually says President of the Republic of India, but this time it says Bharat. That's one reason for all the buzz. The second reason is the upcoming Parliament session. The government has called a special session from September 18 to 22nd. Reports say the name change could be on the agenda. Now, I know you have questions. How does a name change work? What would be the consequences? And why Bharat and not India? So let's try and answer them. First things first, what does the Constitution say? Article 1 begins with the following sentence. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. I'll repeat that. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Doesn't that mean both names are interchangeable? The legal scholars are divided on this issue. Some of them point to other articles of the Constitution. Like Article 77, it refers to the government of India and not Bharat. Also Article 52, which mentions the President of India and not Bharat. But some scholars disagree. They say Article 1 makes it clear that both names are the same, India and Bharat. What's written elsewhere does not matter. So which side is right? Well, that depends on what the government is trying to do. Are they making both names interchangeable, or are they abandoning India for Bharat? So far, there is no word, no clarity. The government has not confirmed anything about the name change. So it's all speculation at this point. Either way, a constitutional amendment will be necessary. You will have to add, remove or tweak parts of Article 1. Now let's assume that the government does that. Is the job done? Quite the opposite, really. The word India is part of so many institutions, laws and positions like the Supreme Court of India, the Chief Justice of India, the President of India. All of it may have to be changed. Every article of the Constitution mentioning India may have to be amended, and even then, there is a final test. Such a move will likely be challenged in the Supreme Court. In fact, it already has been. In 2020, the Supreme Court was hearing a petition. The petition wanted to drop India from the Constitution. And what did the court say? It dismissed the petition. It said, India is already called Bharat. So my point is simple. Even if the government wants it, it will not be easy. There are multiple political and legal challenges to renaming the country, which is why it's important to understand what this debate is about. Where does India come from? Where does Bharat come from? And how are they different? Well, Bharat dates back to Puranic literature. We have different versions of it, like Bharat or Bharatvarsh. Even the Hindu epic Mahabharat mentions it. Mahabharat. Bharat is defined as the land between the sea and the snowy mountains. Sort of fits India's geography, the Himalayas in the north, the Indian Ocean in the south. There are also some legends associated with the name, like the King Bharat. He is said to have been an ancestor of the Pandavas. The belief is all people in the subcontinent descended from him. So the land he ruled became Bharat. And where did India come from? The origin of India is from Sindhu. It is Sanskrit for the river Indus. But getting there took a long time. The Persians modified Sindhu to Hindu. The Greeks borrowed it from the Persians, and they modified Hind and Hindu to Indus. So by the 3rd century, the land south of Indus, the land south of the river Indus, became India. But did the locals use it? Well, not really. Under the Mughal rule, India was called Hindustan. That changed only from the late 18th century. The British began using India instead of Hindustan. We don't know why. Some historians say they liked the Greco-Roman roots. Then came 1947. India became an independent country. The makers of our constitution also debated the country's name. Some wanted Bharat instead of India. But in the end, all such proposals were voted down, and the current one prevailed. India, that is Bharat. Today, there is also political context to this debate. In July this year, India's opposition parties announced a new coalition. A coalition called India. It's an acronym, actually. Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, INDIA. Around 26 opposition parties are part of it. All of them oppose the name change. They say it's about politics and not policy. But the government supporters disagree. They say it's about abandoning India's colonial roots. It's about reclaiming India's past. It's hard to say how this will play out. Even if India changes its name, it won't be alone. Many others have done the same. Turkey, for instance, is now Turkey. The Czech Republic is Czechia. Swaziland is Eswatini. Holland is now the Netherlands. Siam is now Thailand. Burma is Myanmar. Each country had its own reason for the name change. India's reason could determine the outcome of this endeavor. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Gender reveal parties are supposed to be a happy occasion, but this one in Mexico went horribly wrong. The plane releasing the pink smoke on the expectant couple crashed, killing the pilot. In Iraq, millions of Shiite Muslims gathered in the holy city of Karbala for the Shiite pilgrimage of Arba'in. And sometimes a lap can be really costly for an athlete, like this athlete who got confused and went for an extra lap, missing his lead in the triathlon. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day, in 1972, the Summer Olympic Games in Munich took a tragic turn. Palestinian gunmen attacked the Israeli team and took them hostage. 11 people were killed after a botched rescue operation. The attack caused a deep rift between Germany and Israel. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We've crossed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. This is arguably the fastest growing news platform, and we can't thank you enough for fueling this growth. All those of you who join us every day to watch this show and more, thank you. We launched Vantage 7 months ago, and these have been some very rewarding 7 months for us. So from the entire team here, heartfelt gratitude.